What a truly remarkable film. As we continue our program, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our panel moderator, Dr. Helen Chaset. Helen is a graduate of Clark University, where she received her bachelor's in psychology, George Washington University, with a master's of art in special ed, and a doctoral degree in education in program evaluation and special education. With over 45 years as an educator, Helen has made such a significant impact in our community's knowledge and education on Holocaust studies. She has so impacted the lives of students, families, and communities. We are delighted to introduce Dr. Helen Chaset.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you. I want to welcome everybody and also welcome Alan Hall, who's survivor and docent at the Holocaust Memorial, Miami Beach. And I want to welcome Jessica Katz, who's the granddaughter of 2 survivors and board member of the Holocaust Memorial, Miami Beach. And I want to welcome Debra Kapnek, who is the artist who created this wonderful piece that you see behind her and that you heard about in the film 18 Enduring Voices. Deborah, who created the mural, contacted me to ask if my father, Joe Sachs, would agree to sit for a portrait and tell a story. My father, who was an art lover as well as a passionate advocate for Holocaust education, of course agreed. And I was with him during Deborah's interview and photo session and was so pleased when she showed me the painting of him, eager to also see the composite work she was planning. When I saw this film, 18 Enduring Voices, I wanted to be sure others could see it as well. And I appreciate that JCS was happy to present it in collaboration with the Holocaust Memorial, Miami Beach, with the Miami Jewish Film Festival, with Greater Miami Jewish Federation, and Israel Bonds. So, Deborah, early in the film, you describe how you came to the concept or idea of painting these survivors. You used the word possessed. You interviewed, photographed, and painted 42 survivors and preceded this particular work with 2 earlier compositions. This artistic journey spanned over 5 years. What obstacles did you have to overcome in order to complete the 3 compositions?
It wasn't actually 5 consecutive years. I painted the miracle of survival after meeting Seymour in 1995, and I didn't complete 18 Enduring Voices until 2019. In between, I painted a lot of other subjects, including a Hebrew prayer series, lots of still life and landscapes, and then portraits of the people of Darfur in 2006. The biggest obstacle was how to find a permanent home for the paintings after they were completed. And that's still not resolved with 18 Enduring Voices. Finding the survivors to work with seemed to take care of itself because one person led me to another.
So Deborah, if you haven't yet found a home for 18 Enduring Voices, I'm sure that we would find a place in South Florida after the COVID. We should talk. So, but what with all these with the obstacles, what kept you going?
The survivors themselves were what kept me going. There were a few people who didn't want to participate for various reasons, but most of them were extremely supportive of the project. And they inspired me to keep going with their full support and also the gratitude they expressed just because I wanted to devote my work to raising awareness about them and about the Shoah.
You make the statement in the film that there can't be enough documentation about the Holocaust. There can't be enough film, can't be enough writing, can't be enough art. Was that in your mind when working with Dan on this film?
What was in my mind at all times while working on these paintings and on the film as well was how strong they had to be in order to survive and build new lives. I hold them in such reverence because I'm not sure I would have survived the darkness and the loss. And in the filming, Dan and I wanted to add our own voices in the struggle to combat Holocaust deniers who seem to be increasing in numbers.
What about your statement that there can't be enough? What do you mean by that?
Well, there can't be enough art on this subject, mainly because of the crazy world that we live in. And who would have dreamt that there would be people trying to rewrite history? And because most people have never even met a survivor, art can serve as a way to personalize the subject. A viewer confronting 18 larger than life faces of survivors enters their world through the eyes of the portraits. And hopefully they can feel the survivors' deep strength and dignity and understand the triumph of this human spirit.
So I know you spoke at length with my dad and with the others and got their stories. Have you thought about using that interview material from your subjects in some way?
Well, for the first two compositions, as there will be for this one, there's a chart that accompanies the paintings with basic information about each survivor. I didn't ask them about their stories in detail when we met. I was open to hearing whatever they wanted to share. But the point of doing this was not to collect stories, because that's been done by Spielberg and other organizations. My point was to monumentalize their faces, which are so expressive and filled with sorrow and wisdom and life and light, and not just the darkness that we might have expected.
Can you tell us a bit about the making of the documentary and how you worked with Dan, the filmmaker and editor?
I was so lucky to work with Dan. He brought his creative ideas along with years of experience and ingenuity. It was a collaborative effort. It took us months of planning and writing and filming.
So, Allan, Deborah speaks in the documentary about each of her survivor subjects having unique and unbelievable stories. You certainly have one as well. Tell us, please, your story of hiding in plain sight, escape to safety, and survival during the Holocaust.
First of all, I'm delighted to be with you and to be able to tell the story. We lived in those days from day to day. It was a matter of surviving that day, that hour, that minute. And oftentimes, our long-range planning was to survive an hour. I was born in Krakow in 1935, and we were very secure, very comfortable until war started in 39. And then we literally walked from Krakow to about 205 miles, crossed the river without knowing how to swim. And when we crossed that river, we did not know that we were crossing from the Nazi-controlled part of Poland to the Soviet-controlled part. And by so doing, we gained 20 months of life. 1941, the Nazis attacked the Soviets, and we came under their domination. Very quickly, the control was overwhelming, and we could do very little. That's when we started first being in our home, not going out. Subsequently, we got a little note, a card that said we had to leave our house and move to somewhere else. When we came to that place, we found another family there, and soon a third family joined us. What we had no idea was that we were being moved into a ghetto. We voluntarily moved into a ghetto. Things started happening, horrible things, instantly in the ghetto. And so we went into hiding. At first, we hid over the ceiling in the theater. When discovered, we moved from there and hit to a basement, a sub-basement in an industrial plant, where that became too crowded because people were looking for refuge and more people coming down to a safe place. When they became too crowded, we got false identifications indicating that we were Christian, and we moved into the Christian side. But before doing that, one of these times, moving from one to another, my father got informed that there was going to be a roundup of children, a pogrom of children. And while going to a safe house, I was literally the first child taken, put in the back of the truck, and we were taken to a corral in what looked like a police station, but I think it was a concentration camp. And all of these children, myself included, were marked for immediate annihilation. My dad walked in there, talked to the head Nazi for a few moments. My dad spoke brilliant German. He was educated in Vienna. And he left there, and I thought that I was done. He couldn't get me out. But he came back 2 or 3 hours later and talked to the head Nazi again. The Nazi walked away. My dad summoned me to join him, and we walked out of there. When I told the story to the Holocaust Museum here in the United States, in Washington, they said I am the only known survivor of a child roundup, a child pogrom. Well, we started hiding. We were hiding in the Christian side, going from place to place. And one landlady got suspicious, called the cops. Two police officers came. They took us to what we thought was a police station. In fact, I now know it's the Gestapo headquarters. And they just said, take them across the street to the railroad station. But they said, Umschlagplatz, which was the notorious railroad station from where the trains went to Treblinka. I literally missed the train to Treblinka. They just pulled away when we were brought there. And the place got more and more crowded. So they took young children like me that were rambunctious, and they took them to an orphanage in the Warsaw Ghetto. And there I was very happy, did not know that I was in the worst danger. But a man showed up in uniform. I didn't like anybody in uniform. I insisted that he was going to take me to my parents. I didn't trust him. I wasn't going with him. But the adults, he spoke to the adults. They took me outside of the orphanage. And he took me by the hand, this man. He was a small man in a trolley car's conductor's uniform, and put a cap on my head, pulled the brim way down, and walked me right to the guard station. And he said, don't look up and don't say a word. Don't let go of my hand. And he said to the guard station, I just brought my son here to see these Jewish people. And the guard said, you must be very stupid because you shouldn't be on the street this late. It's almost curfew. And if patrols catch you on the street after curfew, they shoot on sight. This man, we walked past the guards, and this man took me straight to my parents and disappeared. That's the way I was taken out of the Warsaw Ghetto. Up after that, my dad found a man who was willing to sublet him, an office in the highest building, tallest building in Poland. And the top 2 floors were occupied by the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force headquarters for Poland. And we were 2 floors, the second floor below that. And at that point, we went into this empty office that my dad procured, and we stayed there in a closet for 2 years. And air raid flushed us out of there. and we had went down into bomb shelters. The bomb penetrated the entire building, wound up with us. Fortunately, it didn't explode. We went to a different bomb shelter where my brother was born. He was born with a birth weight of less than 2 pounds. My mother had no milk. He was destined to die, except that somebody suggested to give him some sugar water. He survived on sugar water and lived a very full life for 75 years and died here in the United States in Miami, Florida. Subsequently, we were, because of my brother, were put on a hospital train, didn't have to go through the identification booths, checking various IDs, and we were taken by train to Krakow, and there we stayed in a safe house provided by the Polish underground, not the underground, Polish, and we were at some 4 months later. That's my Holocaust experience.
So, Allan, for years,
you did time-wise.
You did well. You did very well. You know, and I was
hope you got all that.
I did. I was so fortunate to actually see the building where you and your mother were in hiding, which is now a beautiful, luxurious hotel in Warsaw. And we were able to go in upstairs and see the room, the closet, actually, where you were in hiding. Allan, for years, you've been a regular docent at the Holocaust Memorial, Miami Beach, and you've shared your story with hundreds of teens on the Leo Martin March of the Living. Most recently, you traveled to Central America to share your story, and your current and upcoming schedule is packed with virtual speaking engagements in schools. Why are you spending your retirement, and some would say your leisure years, doing this?
In fact, for many years, I did very little of it. Until about 15 years ago, I thought that the older survivors, the ones who were primarily in concentration camps, were becoming ill and infirmed and even passing on. And as long as one of us is still alive, the story has to be told, to forewarn, to tell that it can happen. It can happen here. It can happen anywhere. It can happen to us, to our children, to our grandchildren. And this is, I try to sound a warning. I also try to help to educate people that you can go through some of the worst times and still survive and still live a fruitful, happy life. As a matter of fact, that's the purpose of my life now.
So that it sounds like that keeps you going.
Absolutely, yes. I had the opportunity to speak to 6,000 people on, I think, three continents using Zoom, fairly recently.
Wow, that's great. What do you think are the messages that most inspire the young people you speak to?
I don't know, but I think they're all awed by the story, and hopefully they take with them the lessons. I hope that they have to think it over, because I try to relate it to them, as I mentioned a moment ago, to tell them that it can happen to them, because we lived a very comfortable, very normal life, probably living a life as good as most folks here do now live here in the United States, and yet it happened to us. So, judging by the feedback, I think many of them understand, perhaps most.
Thank you, Allan. Jessica, as a board member of the Holocaust Memorial Miami Beach, and as the granddaughter of 2 Holocaust survivors, you were already taking on the message of the survivors, remember us, we are the witnesses. But from your perspective as a professional in the art world, how do you think art can be used to keep the memory of the Holocaust alive?
I mean, I think art is a wonderful thing because it can be experienced and felt in so many different ways. You know, in seeing Deborah's paintings and seeing those faces, I see my grandmother in all of them somehow. And I do think that, of course, it takes a wonderfully talented artist to paint someone's face in such a soulful way. But I think Deborah has had the privilege of knowing these survivors that most people have not had. And I think at the memorial, of course, we are a memorial, and you know, the central element of our memorial is a monumental sculpture of a hand with figures crawling up it. And I think that in the absence of knowing somebody who has been through this, of seeing their likeness, whether it's in real life, on Zoom, in a painting, I think it allows us to understand this part of history in our own ways. And it's really open to interpretation. I think when I watched the film, the part that really stuck out to me was the concept of Zahor, and that's everything. And what Allan is doing is heroic in allowing us to speak to somebody who witnessed this, who was a child, who says that it can happen again, just like Helen, your dad did in the movie. And I think we all need to process this in our own ways. And I think art really allows us to do that as a complement to the history books, as a complement to the films, as a complement to what teachers are teaching in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. And this question is for you, Jessica, or for you, Allan, or for you, even, or for you, Deborah, because I think you've also seen the Holocaust Memorial. You've visited when you were in Miami Beach. Mm-hmm. How do you see the design and sculptural impact of the Holocaust Memorial in Miami Beach as fulfilling that purpose of keeping the memory of the Holocaust alive?
Allan, you want to go first? You're on mute, Allan.
Okay. I think it's a wonderful educational tool. We meet people at the Holocaust who have never heard of the Holocaust, people from Asia and Africa. And this is an incredible, and they relate their experiences to the Holocaust, because no matter what continent one comes from, there has been a genocide there at one time or another. It's a wonderful educational tool. And with those graphic portrayals, people see and almost instantly relate. For example, I will take my hand and put it on a segment of the wall where there's a group of names. And I said, you see, this is what's left of my family. And never got a question on it. They understand. So the memorial does a terrific job.
I'm coming back to Deborah. Your painting, your work since and before painting this mural has broadened to other important issues that society needs to address. Can you tell us about some of this other work?
Well, the paintings of this nature that I call social action paintings began long before the Holocaust survivor portraits. In the 1980s, my brother shared photographs with me that he had taken in Mali. And painting and exhibiting the expressive faces of the people who he'd met in Africa led me later to a commission by the American Association for Ethiopian Jews. And then years later, I was challenged to help raise awareness about the genocide happening in Darfur.
So since the creation of the film 18 Enduring Voices, you've shared it, and I should say that it was funded by the Max and Bella Stein Charitable Trust. You've shared this film with organizations that work to improve the lives of Holocaust survivors and to foster Holocaust education. which has given the film a wider audience and broadened the impact of your work. Can you tell us a little bit more about this, Deborah?
Well, the film was created specifically to accompany and enhance the painting in its permanent home. But last March, I realized that finding a location for the painting would be delayed indefinitely. And so lucky for us, Dan had finished filming only a few days before the COVID shutdown. A day or two longer, and it would never have been completed. So it felt like an important gift was given to me exactly at a time when we were all thrust into isolation, and I knew I needed to find a way to use the gift. Last spring, I read that there were 30,000 survivors in the United States living in poverty. I was horrified and astounded. And I learned about the organization Kavod Chef providing help to needy survivors. So we organized a Zoom fundraiser last June in my Philadelphia area community. Our second fundraiser was in support of the Zachor Foundation in LA, which is discussed in the film by Ben Lesser and his daughter Gail.
Mm-hmm. So we are not using the film as a fundraiser, but I do want to point out that Jewish Community Services has matching programs with Kavod Chef, and also I guess that coincidentally the organization that keeps the Holocaust Memorial Miami Beach going is named Zachor. So I think that we have lots of serendipitous connections. As Holocaust survivors are continuing to age, and you mentioned those who are living in poverty, you know that our Jewish Community Services wants to ensure that they live the remainder of their lives in dignity and health. Our Holocaust Survivor Support Program is currently assisting 550 clients that live in Miami-Dade. JCS offers support, care, and compassion for this unique population, and that takes the form of case management, nutrition assistance, emergency services, home health care, housekeeping, and counseling. And most recently, in response to the COVID pandemic, JCS has been able to provide clients with PPE supplies, additional food, and a socially distant program called Care, which gives the clients an opportunity for virtual socialization. Most recently also, JCS is assisting our Holocaust survivors in getting vaccine appointments. A small number of survivors have already received the first vaccine at Mount Sinai, and the remaining survivors who wish to receive the vaccine will receive it in their homes. I want to thank Allan and Jessica for serving on tonight's panel, and many thanks to the leaders of our sponsoring organizations, the Holocaust Memorial Miami Beach, the Miami Jewish Film Festival, the Greater Miami Jewish Federation, Israel Bonds, and Jewish Community Services of South Florida. Together, and with artwork such as this wonderful composite portrait that Deborah has done, we will keep the messages and the lessons that we learned from the Holocaust survivors alive. And Deborah, I'm sure that we could home for this beautiful installation here in Miami-Dade.
I second that.
That would be amazing. Thanks.
Thanks to all of you who have tuned in tonight.